Okay, your quad's not starting. What are you going to do? We're going to follow the rules of troubleshooting and do the easiest thing first. We're also going to follow the other rule of troubleshooting of ignore everything everyone else has told you about the problem. They couldn't fix it. So, the first thing we need is to make sure we have the key. If the key is missing, quad's not going to start. Make sure it's the correct key as well. You're going to try turning it on. Ideally, things will light up. You'll hear a little whir. That's the fuel pump priming. Now, if the battery's dead, quad's probably not going to start. The reason for that is these quads have what's called fuel injection. That means that there's a little pump that pumps your fuel to your motor. And if your battery's dead, it's not going to pump fuel to the motor, therefore it's not going to start. These quads can run once they've started because your engine's producing electricity, which runs your fuel pump, which in turn makes your engine produce more electricity, and it just keeps going in circles and circles. But to get it going, you need to have some battery power. So if the quad's completely dead, if no lights come on, the battery's dead, you're going to have to jump start it with a different quad. Now, if the battery's only somewhat dead, then you can pull start it. You just need a little bit of electricity going to get that fuel pump going. Now, if I press my start button and nothing happens, it could be that everything's working fine. It might just be that your machine is in gear. To make that start button work and start the quad, as it's not doing right now, you're going to have to squeeze in on this brake, which will do their foot. The quad will start. Let's say that doesn't do it. Let's say that I've got my machine turned on, I'm in neutral, so I can start it whenever. If this switch has been bumped, especially as you're getting off your planting bags or your vest might hit it, if this switch is not perfectly in the middle, your quad's not going to start. It might be close and not going. So move this around, make sure it clicks into place, then try again. Okay, side note, tips for using the pull cord. So the pull cord attaches to the flywheel on the motor and it spins the motor. That means that when you're pulling, you're forcing the piston to go up and down. If you are in gear, that means that when you pull, the machine's going to try and go forward as it engages your clutches. If you're like me, you hate pulling and having a sudden stop and it flicking out of your hand. It's also rough on this, and if you break this, you're kind of dead in the water. So make sure the machine's in neutral before you pull on this, and when you pull on this, you want to hold it loosely to start out with. You don't want to do a really firm grip with both hands, because if it stops suddenly, you're going to hurt yourself. You want this to be able to fly out of your hand and recoil without hurting yourself. A little pet peeve of mine, when you let these go, don't do what I just did and let go and let them fly back in. Allow them to recoil back in. That prevents wear and tear. Also, we should wash that. That's filthy. And that dirt's going to get in there. Should clean that out. Okay, so it's cranking. That's the first step. We cannot start a quad that won't crank. The next step beyond cranking is we've got to have something to light. That means we have to have fuel. If you open this, and you can see fuel in there, especially when you shake it, you're in good shape. These gauges are less reliable. The reason is, depending on what angle the machine's at, it may show you have more fuel or less fuel. These bars show how much fuel you have. Full would be right over here, empty would be over there. If the machine runs out of fuel, it's not going to start. Likewise, if the machine was upside down, you may not have fuel going to the right places, and you may have to crank it for a while to get it to start, because you got to have fuel in the correct amount, not too much, not too little. Now let's say your machine was flipped over and you're cranking and cranking and cranking, it's not starting. It may have too much fuel, it may be flooded. It may smell like fuel around the exhaust, you may see fuel in the exhaust. What you're gonna do is you're gonna crank it with your throttle open like this. What that's gonna do is that's gonna push lots of air through it and help evacuate excess fuel out. Only do this if it's not starting because it's been upside down for a while and you had to use your winch to unstick it or get a buddy or something. You can use a little bit of throttle to help it start once in a while, in particular once the engines get warm. as you're cranking a little blip, and I'm talking like a little blip, only for a second, not holding it there, just cranking and pushing once at the same time can help it start as well. All right, quick note on bump starting. Bump starting does not work with these. If you don't know what a bump start is, the premise is that you use the wheels to spin the motor to make it start. These aren't going to do that. The reason for that is they don't have a true clutch system like in a manual vehicle. That means that as you're rolling along, your motor is not going to be spinning with your wheels. Your motor has to spin quick enough that the centrifugal force, which is not real, it's really centrifugal anyway, that's a rabbit hole. It's got to spin quick enough that your clutches can engage and start spinning your tires. It does not work the other way. So trying to bump start these is pointless. All right, so your battery's dead. Somebody left the key on last night. It's not giving it any fuel. It's not starting. You need to jump start this. But oh no, you've got no jumper cables. What you do have is a second quad. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to start this quad and keep it in neutral. Keep this thing running just in case you got to go and get help or something and your attempt fails. You don't want to be stuck with no running quads. The next thing you're going to do is get these two screws and disconnect them. Those are your battery terminals. You'll find a screwdriver there or, in your truck, wherever, or on your multi-tool. You'll figure it out. After that, you're going to undo this little plastic strap and remove this battery from the running quad. Sketchy, but it works. This quad will continue running because it's producing electricity by using the stator, and it's going to keep that fuel pump going. Now that battery has enough charge that you can carry it over to your other quad, the dead one, and you're going to flip it upside down and touch the terminals to the correct terminals. This means positive, positive, negative, negative. Don't get them backwards. It's not going to fry well. That should be enough to get the other one to jump start. You might have to kind of wiggle it around a little bit to get contact. But once you get the other quad started up, then you put the battery back in this one, let that one run for a while, get the battery charged up, carry on with your day.